nighttime walk becomes the scene of a tragic crime. Venturing out with someone you barely know is generally a risky move that often leads to negative outcomes, particularly when you're in an unfamiliar city and the acquaintance was made just hours earlier at a local venue. While it's not always the case, there is a possibility that this casual acquaintance could turn out to be a maniac, assailant, or thief, or they might unintentionally or deliberately involve you in trouble or even lead to disaster. Maricela Botella Valadez, an American student, initially planned to enjoy herself at a popular nightclub where she unexpectedly met an aspiring rapper who took an interest in her and suggested they continue the night in a more private setting. However, the man was already involved in a complex relationship. He found himself entangled in an unusual love triangle, and the other people involved were not pleased by the appearance of the young woman. Her naive trust ultimately cost Maricela her life, though the case proved to be far from simple. It involved intense jealousy, a desire to hold on to fading youth, occult practices, and even an international manhunt for the criminals involved. Nevertheless, thanks to the tireless work of investigators, all those responsible for the crime were located, and the role of each individual was determined. What do we know about Maricela? Maricela Botella Valadez was born in 1997 in Seattle, Washington, the state's largest city. She was the oldest of 2 children in a family of Latin American heritage, growing up alongside her younger brother. Friends described her as a sweet, sociable young woman who had many friends, excelled in school, and, after graduation, attended a prestigious university. Additionally, Maricela was widely regarded as truly beautiful, a petite, slender brunette with large brown eyes, luxurious hair, and a perfect figure. She always attracted plenty of admirers, loved being the center of attention, enjoyed lively parties where she could have fun, and made the most of every day. On Saturday, October 3, 2020, the student flew to Dallas to meet up with old friends. However, by Monday morning, she planned to return. Her brother was supposed to meet her at the airport on October 5th, after which they would head to the university together. But the plane arrived without her. The search for the missing student. When all the passengers from the flight arriving from Dallas had left the airport, her brother realized that Maricela was not among them. Concerned, the young man tried to call his sister, but her phone was turned off. He then called their parents to inform them about the situation. Since Maricela was a serious and responsible young woman, it was out of character for her to disappear without warning and not show up for university classes. The family started calling her friends in Dallas, trying to find out where she might have gone and where she was last seen. It turned out that the night before, she had been partying at one of the city's most popular clubs where she met a black man named Chuck. The pair danced, enjoyed themselves, and had alcoholic drinks, after which they disappeared together. Maricela was not seen again, and her phone went unanswered. The information seriously alarmed and frightened her parents, so they immediately decided to report her disappearance to the police. It turned out that the young woman had indeed bought tickets for a flight to Seattle, but for some reason she had not boarded the plane. No one had seen her since that night, and no one knew where she might be. It was necessary to find out who Maricela's new acquaintance was, where they had gone, and whether she had gone with him willingly. Examining footage from external surveillance cameras located around the club, law enforcement officers saw the missing student leaving with a young man whose face could not be clearly seen on the video. According to the footage, she appeared to be walking with him voluntarily. The pair got into a black Audi car and drove off in an unknown direction. The mysterious new friend. Since the disappearance of 23-year-old Botella Valadez, several days had passed, and she had still not contacted anyone, nor had she logged into her social media accounts, and there were no transactions on her bank cards. The police needed to identify the stranger she had left with as soon as possible to understand where to look for them. One of her missing friends mentioned that her companion was possibly named Chuck, but that information was insufficient. Soon, thanks to the street camera footage, it was possible to determine the direction the car had traveled. Additionally, it turned out that the pair had stopped at a supermarket where they also appeared on camera footage. Both looked happy, smiling, and showing affection for each other. The young woman picked out several drinks and candies, and the young man paid for everything at the checkout using a card in the name of Charles Beltran. Thus, it became clear who Maricela had left with. Beltran was a 31-year-old musician and even considered a rising local rap star. However, the man had a criminal past, having been incarcerated twice for robbery and armed assault. He had served less than 3 years and was released on parole. Recently, the young man's career was on the rise, and he was even preparing to release his own music album. It was soon discovered where Charles lived, and by checking the cell phone carrier's data, it was revealed that the missing student's phone had been active at that fatal night's location. However, the house was owned by a woman named Lisa Dyke, and the musician was just renting a room from her, the very strange house. When police accompanied by an FBI agent assigned to investigate the girl's disappearance visited the address, the house was empty. They were only able to contact Lisa Dyke by phone, as she claimed to be out of state on business. She confirmed that Charles Beltran had been renting a room in her home, but claimed that he moved out a couple of weeks ago, and she had no knowledge of his whereabouts since. Since law enforcement was unable to locate or contact the sole suspect, they obtained a warrant to search the house where he had lived. What awaited them inside was a collection of unexpected and frightening discoveries. The house was in chaos, with disorder and unsanitary conditions prevalent. It seemed as if the occupants had left in a hurry, taking only the most necessary items and leaving everything else scattered around. The kitchen sink was piled high with dirty dishes, moldy food remnants sat on the table, and trash littered the corners. Notably, amidst all this mess, numerous empty bottles of cleaning and detergent products were found scattered around with traces on the floors and carpets, as if something had been thoroughly scrubbed. In one of the upstairs rooms, a peculiar and even sinister black statue of death, draped in a black cloak and holding a scythe, stood. It could have been mistaken for a quirky piece of decor, but it was set up as a sort of altar with wax candles, dried flowers, and 2 metal bowls. It resembled the Mexican religious cult of Santa Muerte, translated as Holy Death, where a female deity representing death is worshipped. The house and the atmosphere within seemed more than just strange. It felt as if something terrible had happened here, and afterward, the occupants hurriedly cleaned up, packed the essentials, and simply fled. To ascertain this, a more thorough examination was conducted using special tools to detect traces of blood. This revealed numerous wiped bloodstains on the floor in one of the bedrooms, in the bathroom, and in the hallway. It was later discovered that the bedroom, where the carpet was practically soaked in blood, belonged to Charles, and it appeared that a violent crime had taken place there. But who was the victim? The missing girl, the tenant himself, or someone else? Despite all attempts to clean the traces, the blood had soaked into the covering, seeped under the baseboards, stained the wallpaper and furniture. Experts compared the found traces with Maricela's DNA, and any last doubts were dispelled. The blood belonged to the girl. The house was sealed as a crime scene, but now the task was to find the main suspect, possible accomplices, and witnesses. This task was not easy. As it turned out, Charles had fled, and the owner, even before the police visit, had hastily put the house up for sale. Therefore, the police decided to learn as much as possible about everyone who had recently lived in this house. The love triangle. Neighbors revealed that 3 people lived in the house: 57-year-old Lisa Dyke, 48-year-old Nina Morano, and 31-year-old Charles Beltran. However, the nature of their relationship and their sudden disappearance remained unclear. It was necessary to investigate each individual's background and find and interrogate them as soon as possible. The house owner, who was the only one reachable by phone, had worked many years as a lawyer, known as a commanding, ambitious, and quite contentious woman. She had been married 3 times, and after becoming a widow several years ago, received a substantial inheritance. There was no financial necessity for her to rent a room to some guy, nor was Lisa known for her charity, suggesting she had some other interest in the matter. The young black man named Charles, or simply Chuck, Beltran dreamed of making it on the music scene to build a rap career, but he lacked both money and connections, and his criminal past hindered him. However, about a year ago, he met Dyke, who moved him into her house, helped set up a small recording studio there, and even sponsored the filming of several music videos for the aspiring rapper. Moreover, she even bought him a car, paid for his entertainment, and fashionable clothes while insisting that their relationship was strictly business, and she saw great potential in this talented young man. The money she spent on him was an investment. The situation with Nina Morano was even more intriguing. She and Lisa had been in an intimate relationship for a long time, and after Dyke became a widow, she stopped hiding her affair with her lover. Moreover, several months ago, the women officially legalized their union by getting married. Nina moved into her spouse's house where Charles was already living. According to a close friend of hers, Lisa had an intimate relationship with the young musician. Although she vehemently denied this, she secretly told her friend how amazing a lover he was. Apparently, she was in love with him because after their relationship began, Dyke desperately tried to look younger. She lost 55 pounds, changed her image, started wearing bright makeup, and even got several colorful tattoos. Most importantly, she evicted her own children from the home who, in her view, were already grown enough and interfered with her personal life. Clearly, Chuck also had a vested interest in living with a wealthy, albeit older lover, as she solved all his financial problems and helped him build a music career. However, he was a noticeable, attractive man in good physical shape, so women did not ignore him. He often engaged in fleeting flings with young women, which drove Lisa insane with jealousy. But what role did Nina Morano play in this whole story, and specifically in the case of Maricella's disappearance? According to the same close friend, Lisa's spouse was part of this strange love triangle and was the only woman with whom Dyke not only allowed her young lover to sleep, but even insisted on it. Nina was also a successful lawyer and a very affluent woman. Thus, this trio lived in pleasure, sparing nothing. Interestingly, after their wedding, both women took the boy's last name, so the house was occupied by Charles, Lisa, and Nina Beltran. Where did the house's inhabitants vanish to? It was discovered that since the student's disappearance, no one had been seen at the house where her blood was found. Lisa was only contacted once. She answered a few questions, stated she was in another state, and thereafter her phone went unanswered. Nothing was known about the fate and whereabouts of Nina, as well as the main suspect, Charles. By tracking mobile phone signals, it was determined that on the night of October 5th, all three inhabitants, as well suburban area of Dallas in a fairly deserted, wooded area. Then the signals disappeared, and a few days later, Lisa only responded from her second work phone, which later also became unreachable. The mutilated remains, using geolocation data from the mobile devices, the route taken that night by the sought-after group was traced, and the stops they made were identified. It was presumed that somewhere in this area, they might have disposed of the missing student's body. This defined a broad search radius, but the area was vast and difficult to navigate, so progress was slow despite efforts. Closer to the new year, the search operation was halted as neither the body nor any clues were found. However, in March 2021, a local hunter wandering through the woods stumbled upon a human skull that appeared relatively fresh. He promptly reported his find to the police, and the remains were soon brought to a forensic laboratory for necessary examinations. Dental records confirmed that the body belonged to the Seattle student who had been missing for nearly half a year. However, the advanced state of decomposition and damage caused by wild animals made it impossible to establish the exact cause of death. Notably, several characteristic marks on the bones suggested knife wounds, but it was unclear whether these were the fatal injuries. The arrest of the first suspects. Soon after the grim discovery in the forest, authorities managed to track down Lisa, who had moved to Florida with Nina and rented a house in Miami by the ocean. Unfortunately, only Nina could be apprehended, while her spouse, learning about the situation, hurriedly went into hiding. There were no traces of Charles, although he periodically communicated with former girlfriends via messengers. In her last correspondence, Dyke mentioned that the young woman's body had been found and warned everyone to be extremely cautious as the police were on their trail. Nina, now incarcerated, refused to provide any information, claiming she knew nothing about Maricella's fate. Meanwhile, Lisa, using all her connections, attempted to hire a good lawyer for her spouse. It also emerged that while in Florida, Nina had put her house in South Carolina up for sale, trying to liquidate it as quickly as possible. It was likely that the women needed the money to continue hiding or to leave the country altogether. A month later, authorities successfully located and arrested Lisa, after which both women were transported back to Dallas. Initial interrogations yielded no results, and a bail of half a $1 million was set for each suspect. They managed to post the significant amount and were released under house arrest. However, the women were fitted with tracking bracelets, which allowed their whereabouts to be monitored, a bold escape attempt. In August of the same year, police traced Charles to Utah, hiding at the house of one of his ex-girlfriends. The woman, who was raising a 5-year-old son fathered by Beltram, was so pleased that the child's father had returned to her that she didn't question the reasons for his unexpected decision. The arrested man initially refused to testify or cooperate with the police. He still hoped that his wealthy lover, using her money and connections, would hire a good lawyer for him and help him avoid prison. But soon the situation drastically changed. On Christmas Eve of December 2021, the tracking bracelets worn by Lisa and Nina, who had been released on bail, suddenly went offline. Due to holiday chaos and high activity, it took until the next day to send a squad to their location. But by then, the suspects were nowhere to be found. It soon turned out that they had been meticulously planning their escape for months, and by the time the police went after them, they had already illegally crossed the border into Mexico. From there, they flew to South Korea, and their trail was lost in Cambodia. The FBI was once again involved in the investigation, working with the Cambodian police and immigration services to track down the fugitive suspects. The women came under law enforcement's radar after withdrawing a large sum of money from an ATM. They tried to pay in cash everywhere to avoid revealing their whereabouts. ATM cameras helped identify the fugitives, and another camera on a neighboring building captured the license plate number of the car they arrived in. This information led to the driver, who took the police to the house rented by the extravagant foreigners. The women were rearrested and extradited to the U.S. in February 2022. Where justice was to be served. This time, bail was denied, and they were sent directly to jail. Charles's candid confessions. By then, Chuck had fully realized that his lover was not going to save him from prison and was only concerned about herself, leading him to express a desire to cooperate with the investigation and start providing information. His account of the events of that dreadful night horrified many. Beltran confessed that he had been in an intimate relationship with the homeowner, Lisa, and her spouse, Nina. According to him, he engaged in these relationships for money and the opportunity to advance his music career. He harbored no warm feelings towards these women and often indulged in affairs with young and attractive women, which he never hid. While Nina was indifferent to his actions, Lisa sometimes became wildly jealous. On the fateful night of October 5, 2020, Chuck met a young student named Maricela at a nightclub. The beautiful, slender girl immediately caught his attention, and it seemed he caught hers as well. After spending several hours drinking cocktails and dancing, he invited her over and she agreed. When they arrived at his place late at night, Nina and Lisa were already asleep, so Charles easily took the girl to his room. There, the couple engaged in intimate activities and later fell asleep. According to the suspect, in the middle of the night, Lisa entered his room, and seeing the young beauty asleep next to him, flew into a jealous rage. She went to the kitchen to grab a large knife, then returned and leaped onto Maricela, repeatedly striking her. Charles claimed he was awakened by the noise and was disoriented at first, still somewhat intoxicated. When he finally turned on the light, he was confronted with a horrific scene. Maricela's body had slid to the floor next to the bed where she had bled out. At that moment, Nina entered the room. They just stood there for a few minutes, and nobody attempted to help the victim. When Chuck regained his composure, he realized that the crime might be pinned on him since he had a criminal record, and his influential lovers could escape punishment. That's why, he said, he agreed to help dispose of the body and cover up the crime. Charles stayed with friends for several days, and when he returned to collect his belongings, he noticed that the bloodstains on the floor and carpet had nearly disappeared. Lisa told him that she and Nina had taken care of everything and destroyed the evidence of the crime. Nevertheless, All three decided it was best to leave town for a while and watch from afar what would happen next. Lisa Dyke Beltran's version. Lisa's lawyer insisted that his client had no motive to attack the girl and take her life. She claimed that her relationship with Chuck was strictly business, and she viewed his promising music career as a good investment. Who he slept with or flirted with never concerned her. As a key argument, the defender pointed out that Dyke had recently entered into marriage and was happy with Moran. However, no one could explain why after their wedding, the women suddenly decided to take the surname of the young lodger, who, according to them, meant nothing to them. At the trial, Lisa claimed that Charles was hot-tempered and very cruel, and when drunk, he became a beast, whom she feared. According to her, that night he brought a new girl from the club. But after they became intimate, an argument erupted, and Chuck, in a fit of rage, grabbed a knife. She and Nina ran to the noise and tried to separate the couple, but it was too late. Marcella was dead. They helped dispose of the body and clean up the scene under the threat of becoming his next victims. Witness testimonies. Lisa's friend, who testified in court, claimed that Lisa was literally obsessed with Chuck and had repeatedly confessed to her an uncontrollable desire to eliminate any girl who got close to her young lover. Clearly, she was unable to manage her emotions that night. Additionally, the witness mentioned the odd statue of Santa Muerte at her friend's house. She recalled being surprised by the improvised altar during a visit, but the homeowner jokingly claimed she was into black magic and knew how to cast a spell to ensure a man could only have eyes for her. However, it seems the ritual failed, and the woman resorted to using a knife. Another witness, a real estate agent approached by the women shortly after the incident, testified that they were eager to sell several properties they owned as quickly as possible. They also wanted to put their Dallas home on the market, but since it was the site of the alleged crime, they couldn't while the investigation was ongoing. The situation escalated when the remains of the missing girl were discovered, after which Lisa and Nina were ready to sell the property at half price just to get the money quickly. Trial and sentences. The court took into account Charles's full confession and his cooperation with the investigation. However, the situation for the fugitives worsened after their attempt to flee to another continent. In March 2023, Lisa Dyke Beltran was found guilty of the brutal crime against 23-year-old Maricela, concealing evidence and attempting to flee. She was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. As for Charles Beltran and Nina Moran, they fully admitted their guilt and agreed to cooperate with the investigation. They were only found guilty of concealing evidence. Nina was sentenced to 7 years in prison, but could be released in 3 years due to good behavior. Charles, previously convicted on multiple occasions, was sentenced to 12 years in prison with the possibility of parole after serving 8 years. Milford, a picturesque coastal city in Connecticut, lies along the Long Island Sound, offering stunning views and a thriving community. Spanning just over 25 square miles, it is home to more than 50,000 residents. Renowned for its beautiful beaches, Milford draws visitors and locals alike who enjoy its scenic surroundings and waterfront activities. The city also boasts a rich history that dates back to colonial times, featuring a mix of historic buildings and modern amenities. In 2022, the people of Milford had no inkling that tragedy was about to strike. To understand the depth of the loss, it's important to first explore Julie Manogue's background. Julie was born on July 19, 1982, in the quaint town of Goshen, New York. She was raised by her loving parents, Gerald J. Manogue and Sandra Barish Doper, alongside her 2 siblings, sister Allison Barty Corcoran and brother Peter Gerald Manogue. Academically gifted, Julie excelled throughout her school years, attending the well-regarded Monroe Woodbury schools and graduating from Monroe Woodbury High School. She continued her education at Orange County Community College, broadening her knowledge and embracing new opportunities. After college, Julie became a dedicated medical assistant at Connecticut Coastal Obstetrics Gynecology, finding fulfillment in her work. She led an active lifestyle, often running and walking to stay energized. However, her greatest joy came from being a mother to her 2 sons, Nicholas Keith Turner and Sean Michael Turner. Details about her marriage and husband remain unknown at this time. Julie's dedication and love as a single mother were remarkable, shaping the strong bond shared among them. Julie Minogue found love once again in 2017 and got into a relationship with a man from Roxbury named Ewan Anthony DeWitt. Together, they welcomed a son in 2019 named Luke Anthony Minogue into their lives. However, as time passed, difficulties arose in their relationship, which led Julie to make the decision to leave Ewan in 2021. She moved with her sons to a condo on Salem Walk in Milford, and their well-being remained her top priority. In 2022, Nicholas, the eldest son, was 21 years old and had bravely served his country in the Coast Guard, while Sean, at 17 years old, was a vibrant young man and was thriving as a high school senior. Her son with Ewan, Luke, was 3 and a bright light in their household. Julie herself was 40, and all seemed well for her and her 3 boys. But tragedy was waiting just around the corner. Late at night on December 6, 2022, 17-year-old Nicholas Minogue was startled awake by chilling screams. He didn't wake up at the first noise, and he dismissed it thinking that it could just be echoes from the neighborhood. But the cries were growing louder and more urgent, and he realized something was terribly wrong. Concerned about his mother's safety, Nicholas rushed down the stairs. As he descended, amidst the darkness, he caught a glimpse of a chilling scene. A man wielding an axe and his mother lying on the floor, her body drenched in blood. In the midst of the chaos, Nicholas heard the haunting words, "You didn't believe me," ringing in his ears. In a panic, the teenager raced upstairs and swiftly locked the door, determined to keep himself safe. He dialed 911 and urgently reported the horrifying scene which had unfolded before him. Determined to provide an extra layer of protection, he quickly placed a sturdy chair behind the locked door. With his heart pounding, he opened his window, desperately reaching out for help. Within minutes, police officers arrived and entered the house, but the teenager, gripped by fear, leaped out of the window. That's when he heard Milford PD shouts and realized it was not the intruder. Eventually, the authorities found the courageous teen and ensured his safety. In a devastating discovery, the police entered the kitchen to find Julie Minogue lying in a pool of blood on the floor. Her face and skull had been injured by multiple deep cuts. A chilling sight awaited them as they spotted a large axe resting on the stove nearby, carrying evidence of the horrific crime. Meanwhile, in the living room, Julie's young son Luke, who was 3 years old, sat on the couch completely stunned and unresponsive. Not a tear nor a word escaped him, as if he was frozen in shock. The officer stayed by his side and offered him comfort and support until additional officers arrived at the scene. Following her tragic demise, Julie's body was carefully transported to the Connecticut office of the chief medical examiner for a thorough examination. After conducting a meticulous autopsy, the medical examiner determined the cause of her death to be the chopped wounds and blood impact injuries on the head, torso, and extremities. The detailed findings provided crucial evidence regarding the nature of the attack, shedding light on the tragic circumstances surrounding her untimely demise. As the police took custody of the axe found on the gas stove, they meticulously combed through every inch of the area as they were determined to uncover any potential evidence that could lead them closer to the perpetrator. Inside the house, they embarked on an extensive search, carefully examining each room for any clues that could shed light on the heinous crime. The commotion attracted the attention of concerned neighbors who gathered nearby. The atmosphere was tense as the community was eager to support the investigation in any way they could. Amidst the growing crowd, a helpful neighbor came forward with an unexpected piece of evidence: Ring camera footage from outside his house at Longmeadow Complex. The police eagerly seized the opportunity, hoping that the footage might hold a crucial clue. As they watched the footage, they witnessed an unsettling sight. An individual walking with an axe in hand, closely resembling the description provided by Nicholas. The discovery sent a wave of anticipation through the investigators as they realized they might have found a significant lead. The police began to look into who this man with the axe could be. That very day, on December 6, 2022, a crucial breakthrough took place when a concerned woman called the police recounting a chilling phone call from her son. In her trembling voice, she shared the shocking revelation that her son just called her and said that he killed his girlfriend. The The urgency in her words spoke an immediate response from law enforcement. Determined to unravel the truth, they swiftly tracked down the woman and engaged her in conversation. It was then revealed that the man responsible for this ominous confession was none other than Ewan DeWitt, the 42-year-old man who was once in a relationship with Julie. With this vital information in hand, the police dialed Ewan's number hoping to engage him in a crucial conversation. However, their efforts were met with resistance as Ewan abruptly hung up the call. So it was important for the police to look into Ewan's history, which they believed could provide them vital information needed to proceed further. Born in the town of Roxbury in 1979, Ewan Anthony DeWitt possessed a diverse range of interests and pursuits. As a talented athlete, he pursued his passion for ice hockey and even reached the level of playing semi-professionally. Ewan's thirst for knowledge led him to obtain a bachelor's degree in history from Siena College, showcasing his intellectual curiosity. He was not a person who'd be satisfied from a single vocation, so he also embarked on the journey to become a firefighter. Additionally, Ewan also shared his expertise as a personal trainer. In 2006, Ewan was arrested in Connecticut for driving under the influence and traffic offenses. He pleaded guilty, resulting in a suspended prison sentence and probation. After this, Ewan DeWitt's journey took an inspiring turn when he joined the prestigious ranks of the U.S. Marine Corps in 2009, where he embarked on a path as a skilled weapons specialist and non-commissioned officer. He served his country for 5 years and attained the rank of Lance Corporal in 2011. In a remarkable photo from his time in the Marines, Lance Corporal Ewan DeWitt is seen in action as a machine gunner. The picture shows him courageously operating a powerful M250 caliber machine gun on a vehicle during an important defense of the amphibious task and forced naval exercise. The event took place on December 3, 2011, aboard the USS Chima. With his leadership qualities and expertise, he assumed the role of a machine gun section leader in the esteemed 1st Reconnaissance Battalion. Ewan dedicated himself to his duties, serving multiple tours in Afghanistan, the Middle East, and other classified locations with his dedicated brothers. Ewan and his brothers' inspiring story was captured in a 2015 article in the Register Citizen, highlighting their collective efforts to restore a piece of history. Ewan's life took a darker turn when he faced legal trouble. In November 2019, the Milford police arrested him for assaulting a victim, which resulted in a protective order being issued by the court. The case remains unresolved as court records revealed that it was still pending. With his next court date scheduled for April 14, 2023, Ewan maintained his innocence by pleading not guilty. He was released on a $20,000 bond awaiting the judicial process to unfold. Ewan's troubled past included a disturbing incident in which he was arrested for his actions towards Julie shortly after the birth of her son. Reports stated that he'd thrown a large object at Julie Minogue. I had also destroyed her phone to prevent her from calling for help. Fearing for her safety, Julie sought refuge at a neighbor's house in contact of the authorities. The incident highlighted the alarming nature of Ewan's behavior and its impact on those around him, adding another layer of intensity to the unfolding events. In 2021, he faced charges of assaulting emergency personnel and a female in Wake County, North Carolina. Court records indicated that he pleaded guilty and received a combined jail sentence of 95 days, although the exact duration of his incarceration remained unknown. These encounters with the law showcased a pattern of concerning behavior, raising further questions about Ewan's character and past actions. Behind Ewan to its troubled history, a darker pattern of violence emerged, specifically targeting Julie Mano. Several protective orders were filed against Ewan due to previous instances of domestic violence. These orders were issued in November 2019 and January 2021 and were put in place to safeguard not only Julie, but also the children who were present during those incidents. One such incident involved Ewan being intoxicated and engaging in a heated argument with Julie. According to a statement provided by the victim's son, Ewan had thrown a playpen at Julie's head, which resulted in a distressing injury. While Ewan was in rehabilitation, Julie took steps to file a restraining order, seeking protection from his harmful actions. Despite this, Ewan was granted visitation rights, which left a lingering sense of unease and concern about the safety of those involved. In addition to their troubled relationship, Julie and Ewan DeWitt found themselves entangled in family court cases beginning in 2021. It all began when Julie filed a petition for child support for their son Luke in August 2021. In October 2021, a judge ruled in her favor and ordered Ewan to provide financial support. As tensions continued to escalate, Ewan took Julie to court in December 2021, seeking resolution regarding visitation rights. The court intervened and granted supervised visitation for Ewan in April 2022 with a scheduled hearing in April 2023 to further address the matter. These legal battles shed light on the complexities and challenges faced by Julie and Ewan as they navigated their post-relationship dynamics. As the investigation progressed, new details were revealed that on November 14, 2022, just 3 weeks before her death, Julie took a decisive step by visiting the Milford Police Department to file a complaint against Ewan. She alleged that he'd bombarded her with over 200 text messages within a span of just 2 days, despite the existence of a protective order that explicitly forbade him from contacting her. Officer Scott Nablin listened to Julie's concerns and diligently collected evidence of the text messages from her phone, further solidifying the case against Ewan. In a heartfelt plea for protection, Julie Minogue expressed her deep concern for her safety and the well-being of her children in a sworn affidavit submitted on November 17, 2022. Determined to put an end to the ongoing abuse, she stated, "I don't believe I should endure this mistreatment any longer." Fearful of the consequences, she detailed the relentless harassment she faced. Julie Minogue also wrote in the document that Ewan has got himself into a lot of trouble with drugs and alcohol, and I'm scared he's going to kill me. Officer Nablin, resolute in his pursuit of justice, meticulously crafted an arrest warrant, alleging Ewan's violation of the protective order. The document, filled with crucial details, was reviewed by supervisor, ensuring its accuracy and validity. They made sure that the arrest warrant application contained the requisite probable cause to support the charge that the text messages sent by Ewan DeWitt violated the modified protective order that was issued on January 15, 2021. On November 21, 2022, the court reopened the warrant application and made its way to the Milford State's Attorney's Office. However, the story took an unexpected turn as the Assistant State's Attorney, committed to thoroughness, sent the warrant application back to Officer Nablin and requested further information before proceeding. In this delicate dance between law and justice, every step forward demanded meticulous attention to detail. However, on December 1, 2022, Julie Minogue successfully obtained a civil restraining order from a judge. In the hearing, which lasted about an hour, Julie presented evidence of the text messages, Ewan's struggles with substance abuse, mental health issues, and a history of violence. She expressed concern for Ewan's well-being, describing his bipolar rage and erratic behavior, and emphasized the importance of him receiving proper treatment and therapy. Julie firmly believed that Ewan should not be allowed around anyone until he'd received the necessary help and support. Recognizing the imminent danger she faced, a no-contact restraining order was swiftly issued on December 1, 2022, providing a legal shield against any further interaction with Ewan. But this order took a darker turn when, 5 days later, Ewan killed Julie with an axe in her condo. Now all the evidence indicated that Ewan was the main focus of the investigation, and the search for him intensified as the police tirelessly canvassed the area around the Salem Walk condominium, leaving no stone unturned. Their efforts led them to a dive bar on Ocean Avenue in West Haven, where they sought the assistance of the local community. They approached patrons informing them about the ongoing investigation and urging them to notify the authorities if they spotted Ewan DeWitt. It was during this concerted effort that 2 observant individuals caught sight of a person who matched the suspect's description. Eager to aid the investigation, they immediately flagged down the police, providing crucial information about the suspect's whereabouts. Engaging with one of the witnesses who preferred to remain anonymous, the police learned that the individual had witnessed someone resembling the suspect wandering around the parking lot for a brief period. Eventually, the suspect entered a food truck located in the parking lot. Acting swiftly, the police converged on the scene. Without incident, they apprehended Ewan DeWitt on December 6, 2022, bringing him into custody and moving one step closer to uncovering the truth. The police initiated a rigorous interrogation of Ewan about the early hours of December 6, 2022. Initially, Ewan maintained a stoic silence, withholding vital information. However, after hours of intense questioning, a breakthrough occurred. Ewan finally confessed to the gruesome act of taking Julie's life with an axe. He revealed that he'd silently entered the house through the kitchen window, concealing himself in anticipation of his victim's arrival. When Julie eventually entered the kitchen, he launched an attack, wielding the axe with deadly intent. It was during this horrifying moment that Nicholas, Julie's son, descended the stairs and confronted the scene. Overwhelmed with fear, Ewan fled, leaving the axe behind on the gas stove. Ewan's admission sent shock waves through the investigation, bringing forth a chilling account of the tragic events that unfolded that night. During Ewan's initial court appearance in State Superior Court in Milford on December 7, 2022, Assistant State Attorney Alana Paul informed the judge about new developments in the case. She revealed that Ewan had fully admitted to the incident, but even without that admission, she believed the evidence against him was substantial. Attorney Paul highlighted the presence of surveillance footage and the testimony of Julie's son, who had observed part of the incident. Given the seriousness of the case, Paul argued that a significant bond was necessary. Emphasizing the gravity of the situation, Judge Auden Groggins set his bond at $5 million. The judge expressed concerns about Ewan's history of disregarding court orders and emphasized the importance of public safety. In light of the circumstances, Ewan was placed on suicide watch with a hearing scheduled for December 14, 2022 to further address the case. Finally, it was the day of the final decision. On December 14, 2022, in addition to the murder charge, Ewan DeWitt faced multiple other charges brought forth by the Milford police. These included criminal violation of a protective order, criminal violation of a restraining order, risk of injury to a minor, and reckless endangerment. By levying these charges, law enforcement sought to address the broader scope of Ewan's alleged actions and their impact. A hearing was scheduled for Ewan to its pending criminal cases on April 6, 2023. He has yet to plead. Prosecutors stated that Ewan already confessed to the murder of Julie Minogue. However, no further information has been released by the police about the hearing. In the statement, the family expressed their determination to take action and ensure that those who neglected their responsibilities are held accountable. They also expressed their hope that this case would serve as a catalyst for improved protections for individuals facing domestic violence and abuse. With their unwavering commitment, the family aims to bring about positive changes and prevent such tragic incidents from occurring in the future. This case involved a combination of diligent efforts by law enforcement and the heinous acts of a killer who killed his ex-girlfriend in a rage of anger. July 31, 1999, marked J.B. Beasley's 17th birthday. She and her friend Tracy Howlett had plans to drive to a field party a few miles north of their hometown, Dothan, Alabama, to celebrate. The two left in J.B.'s black 1993 Mazda just after 10 p.m. However, they became lost while searching for the party and eventually ended up in Ozark, a town about 20 miles northwest of Dothan. Around 11:30 p.m., they found themselves in the parking lot of a convenience store that had closed just half an hour earlier. There, they met a woman who gave them directions to get back on track for the road leading home. Tracy then called her mother, Carol Roberts, to let her know they were lost and would be heading back instead of continuing to the party. Before hanging up, Tracy told her mother that she loved her. The woman who gave the girls directions saw them drive out of the parking lot, heading in the correct direction. When the girls did not arrive home by dawn the next morning, Carol Roberts called the police. JB's Mazda was found around 9 a.m. that morning in Ozark, less than a mile from the convenience store JB and Tracy were last seen at. There were no signs of anything out of place in the vehicle until police opened the trunk and discovered the bodies of the two girls. They had both been shot. In the fall of 2018, the Ozark Police Department hired Parabod Nano Labs to use genetic genealogy to try to match DNA found at the scene of the crime to genetic genealogy to try to match DNA found at the scene of the crime to a suspect. Parabon uploaded the DNA sequence to GED-Match, but the only matches in the database were very distant, and Parabon was only able to narrow down the search to a particular extended family. The Ozark Police Department began collecting voluntary samples from individuals in that family in hopes of figuring out where their suspect belonged in it. One of the voluntarily provided samples turned out to be an exact match to the sample found at the crime scene. On March 16, 2019, police arrested the individual who provided that sample, 45-year-old Coley McCraney. McCraney is a truck driver and a preacher who had not previously been a suspect in the case. He denies any involvement with the murders. He is being charged with capital murder and rape, and the district attorney has announced plans to seek the death penalty. A preliminary hearing in the case is scheduled for April 3rd. On June 9, 1969, childhood sweethearts Clifford Bernhard and Linda Reich were married at the Pilgrim Congregational Church in Billings, Montana. Clifford was a Vietnam veteran who had received a Purple Heart during his service. The Bernhards spent the next several years working hard to build their lives together. Linda wanted to become a teacher one day and worked at a distribution warehouse while her husband worked pouring concrete. The couple worked together at a second job, cleaning carpets at night. Because of their hard-working nature, their families knew that something was wrong when Clifford and Linda did not show up for their night job on November 6, 1973. The following morning, Linda's mother went to their house to check on them. When she did not get an answer at the door, she forced her way inside the house. There, she found the bodies of her son-in-law and daughter. They had both been 24. Clifford had suffered a major head wound, and they had both been strangled after being tied up for some time. Linda had been sexually assaulted, and all of her underwear had been removed from the home. There was no sign of forced entry into the house, and it appeared as though the Bernhards had a guest at dinner the night before, leading police to believe that the couple may have known their killer. This did not help them make an arrest in the case, however, and the case went cold. Police did not give up on finding Clifford and Linda's killer, though. In 2004, they examined evidence from the crime scene and obtained a DNA sample. In 2015, they contacted Parabon Nanolabs to use their snapshot DNA analysis to create a composite image of what the killer may have looked like based on his genes. At the end of 2018, Parabon uploaded the DNA to GeneMatch and performed genealogical research to find the killer's family. On January 3, 2019, Parabon informed police that they had a lead in identifying a suspect. They had narrowed down the search to 2 individuals. These 2 individuals were very closely related, however, so further examination of their DNA would be needed to confirm which one of them was a suspect. One of the individuals agreed to provide a DNA sample. After careful examination of this individual's genetic code, it was confirmed by the Montana State Crime Lab that the sample came not from the individual who volunteered his DNA, but from the other potential suspect. On March 25, 2019, the Yellowstone County Sheriff's Office announced that the other potential suspect was Cecil Stan Caldwell, who had been a co-worker of Linda's at the warehouse. Caldwell died in 2003 at the age of 59 and therefore cannot be brought to trial for the murders. While Caldwell cannot legally be declared the couple's killer, identifying him through the DNA of the crime scene has given Clifford and Linda's families some answers to the questions that have haunted them for the past 46 years. Tess Ritchie was born on November 30, 1994. The youngest in a family of 5 girls, Ritchie was raised in North Bay before moving to Toronto at 19. One of her sisters, Verena Ritchie, said Tess loved her life, her dogs, and her family. Tess had served tables in the city, but her dream was to land a job as a flight attendant and see the world. She was taking steps to do just that, having completed the flight attendant course at Seneca College in North Toronto. At the same time, she was trying to get a job in one of the major hotels in Toronto. Unfortunately, Tess couldn't find a job to her liking. Her family financially supported her and never refused money when she asked for help. Some Canadian sources also say that when Tess didn't get a job at an airline or a hotel, she started learning Italian and searching for au pair jobs in Italy through the internet. Tess also had her own YouTube channel. The last video she published there was on February 23, 2014, almost 4 years before the events we'll discuss today. Tess talked about her experiences and the difficulties she had to face. Let's listen to some excerpts from this video. Unfortunately, a few years after recording this video, Tess again faced problems in her personal life. That fall, heartache destroyed her life. On November 23, 2017, Tess went through an emotional breakup with her boyfriend, Julian. The next day, she turned to her older sister, Rachel, who was 8 years older than her. The two were close. "She was my soulmate," Rachel said. On November 24th, Cass spent most of the day at Rachel's house in Toronto. They talked about the breakup, went shopping, and visited a dog park. That evening, Rachel cooked some food. However, she had to persuade her sister to eat as she had no appetite due to stress. Despite this, Tess made plans for the night. She decided to meet an old school friend named Riley Samar. Like Richie, Samar was from North Bay. She had moved to Toronto in the summer of 2017. The two hadn't seen each other in years, but now that they were both living in the same city, they had started talking again. Samar suggested they go to Cruise and Tangos, a well-known drag bar in the church in Wellesley area. That evening, Rachel's partner ordered Richie an Uber so she could meet Samar downtown. Richie recalled seeing her sister running down the front path to the Uber. That fleeting glimpse was the last time she would see her alive. Richie arrived at Cruise and Tangos around midnight. Samar wasn't there yet. The club was full of people. Tess texted her sister to tell her she reached the place safely. It was commonplace. Richie's phone was her second best friend, her sister said. The following morning, Richie sent her younger sister a text message. She didn't expect to hear back immediately considering Tess had been out the night before. By 6:30 p.m., Rachel still hadn't heard from her. Soon after, she noticed that none of her texts had reached Tess. Rachel tried calling, but all the calls went straight to voicemail. Her mother, Christine Hermiston, also tried to contact Tess, but her phone was off. Christine received a message saying that Tess had ordered an Uber at 4:02 a.m. However, soon after, she canceled it. When registering an Uber account, Tess indicated her mom's credit card. Hence, Christine received a message every time her daughter used a taxi. Tess always kept in touch with her family. So, when her phone did not turn on during the day, they began to suspect something could have happened to her. She usually had her phone on her at all times. Rachel asked her partner to check her sister's apartment in Scarborough. At the same time, she started contacting her friends. It was about 9 p.m. on Saturday. Tess was still missing. Her family had a bad feeling about all this. Rachel started calling hospitals and also contacted the police. By the evening of the following day, the police had no news for Tess's family. Several officers tried to find out where Tess Richie might be, but no one had seen or heard from her in the last 2 days. On Monday, Tess's mother, Christine, and one of her sisters traveled from North Bay to Toronto to participate in the search. They were putting up and handing out flyers with Tess's picture, hoping someone might have seen her. The family did everything in their power. As for the police, they, unfortunately, did not show their best side when investigating the disappearance of Tess, but we'll talk about this a little later. At the same time, it turned out that Tess's friend, Riley, with whom they visited the bar together, returned home safely after that night. When they asked Riley if she knew where Tess had gone, she said she and Tess had drunk a lot, which resulted in the bar security asking them to leave. They left the bar shortly after 2 in the morning and went to Wellesley Street to eat something. On the way there, they met a guy who eventually went with them. Riley couldn't remember his name. On Wellesley Street, they ordered hot dogs. Tess wanted a vegetarian hot dog, which ended in a conflict with the seller. Tess believed they gave her a hot dog with meat. Riley admitted that her friend took mustard and sprayed the vendor cart with it, after which she, Tess, and the guy with them had to run to Dundonald Street. While there, they saw a woman on the house porch and started talking with her. Her name was Michelle Tipp. Their conversation lasted about 20 minutes. Tess told Michelle that she had recently broken up with her boyfriend and shared how hard it was for her. Michelle tried to support Tess. Moreover, they even exchanged phone numbers. Tipp said Richie seemed like someone trying to have a good time, but when she looked into her eyes, she saw sadness. The breakup with Julian appeared to be weighing her down. I told her everything does get better and just to hang in there, Keep said. At 4 a.m., Riley received a text from her boyfriend asking her to come home. She said goodbye to Tess and walked towards Young Street and then home. Tess was disappointed that Riley had left her. At 4:02 a.m., she ordered an Uber. Thus, one can assume that after her friend left her, Tess decided to go home too. The driver arrived at 4:14 a.m., but Tess wasn't there. On Wednesday, November 29th, just one day before Tess's 23rd birthday, Christine again distributed flyers with her daughter's picture in the area where people last saw her. Knowing that Riley had parted with Tess on Dundonald Street, Christine decided to explore this area. She turned to in Brazeau, a nurse who worked at St. Michael's Hospital, as their daughters had been friends since elementary school in North Bay. Together, they set out to find Richie amid a growing search effort and social media push to locate her. That's when Brazil made a haunting discovery. Peering into the bottom of an outdoor stairwell in a construction site at 582 Church Street, Brazil immediately recognized Richie's body lying on the concrete. In 2017, this building was under reconstruction and partially fenced. It looked like this. I went into complete shock, horror, disbelief. I couldn't process or make sense of what I was seeing. Brazeau said through tears. I was terrified. Dust from a nearby gravel pile lay like soot on her body. Brazeau let go of the staircase railing and walked backward down the gravel driveway toward Church Street. Hermiston was farther up the sidewalk by that point. Unaware that her daughter's body was so close by, Brazil began to call out to her. Christine, come back here. She said, there's a girl in the stairwell. You've got to come back. Hermiston turned, raced down the driveway and stopped dead at the stairwell. After a few moments, she started screaming and asking God for help. Tessa's death became a heartbreaking challenge for her whole family. They found her body just 300 yards from the bar where she spent time before she disappeared and just 20 yards from where her friend Riley last saw her. It raised a lot of questions about the work of the police. After all, her body was a couple of blocks from the bar all this time. However, after Anne and Christine found Tessa's body, an anonymous police source provided the press with new information. Allegedly, Tess advertised her intimate services via the internet and worked in a strip club. The grieving mother said Toronto police didn't do enough to search for Richie because they assumed she was an escort. It was horrifying to read that. Hermiston replied angrily at what police sources told the media after her body's discovery. She was not making a living in the sex trade industry. It's a blatant lie. They leaked that so it would look like she lived a high-risk life and was in a laneway with somebody, and it wasn't their fault. Although Tess did work as a waitress at a strip club, she quit less than 2 weeks after they hired her. As for intimate services advertisement, it was just an account on a dating site. Even though they had found Richie's body, there was no explanation for what happened to her. Police did not initially suspect foul play, but the homicide unit eventually took over the case after an autopsy revealed she had died of neck compression. Moreover, they found seminal fluid on the girl's clothes and saliva on her bra. After some tests, they found traces of male DNA. Thus, the police finally started searching for a suspect. Considering Riley's testimony, the detectives were trying to figure out the identity of the guy the girls met that night. After all, he was the person Tess stayed with after Riley went home. The police turned to CCTV footage to learn more about that night. This video shows Tess and Riley leaving the bar and going towards the hot dog vendor's cart. There were also CCTV cameras on the building close to where Brazeau found the body. After analyzing the recordings, the police saw Tess and her new acquaintance walking hand in hand up the gravel driveway. According to the information voiced by the police, the camera captured Tess and this unknown man at 4:14 a.m. The following recording, taken 46 minutes later, shows the guy leaving the place alone. Tess never appeared in the footage again. Therefore, the police believe this man was the main suspect in the Tess Richie case. On December 10th, during a press conference, the Toronto police published pictures of this man taken with the help of a video surveillance system. They hoped someone would recognize him. The pictures taken by an ATM camera were of poor quality. An ATM was next to the place where Richie bought hot dogs. In the evening of the same day, the police discovered the identity of this man. Oddly enough, after seeing the published images, the man called the police station himself. "I'm the guy in the photo," he said. The person who was with Tess that night was 21-year-old Colleen Schlatter. In the fall of 2017, Schlatter was 21 and living with his parents and younger brother at their North Toronto home. He had completed a year of postgraduate study as a car mechanic and worked with his dad in construction. Schlatter, his parents, and one of his lawyers went to the police station where he briefly spoke with detectives but refused to testify. His parents brought some food and a bottle of water for their son. In the end, they provided police with some crucial evidence. While still at the police station, Schlatter threw an empty water bottle into a trash can. The police promptly seized it and sent it for forensic medical examination. It took some time, but eventually, they determined that the DNA sample on the bottle and DNA samples extracted from seminal fluid and saliva found on Tess Ritchie's body belonged to the same person. Police planned an undercover operation to monitor Schlatter for several weeks, but the DNA results accelerated the process. Schlatter was arrested around 11 p.m. on February 4, 2018 after watching the Super Bowl with his family at the Cineplex Cinemas Queensway in Etobicoke. They took him to 13 Division and placed him in a holding cell at 3:19 a.m. on February 5th. Two other men were locked in holding cells on either side of him. Schlatter had no idea both were undercover cops and that he was about to give them an abundance of evidence. The three men sat in separate nondescript holding cells with a combination toilet and sink as well as a bed. Schlatter was locked in a cell between the two cops with all three men facing the same wall. None of them could see each other, but that didn't stop them from talking for hours. Schlatter told these policemen about his passion for card games and his ability to seduce women. According to him, he has slept with more than 40 women even though he was only 21 years old. However, he did not mention that he liked both men and women. As it turned out later, Schlatter did not meet Tess and her friend Riley on the street. He was in the same bar as them. That's where he first noticed them. This recording was made shortly before security asked Tess and Riley to leave the bar. Here's Riley and here's Tess and this is Schlatter. Schlatter also told undercover officers about Tess. At first, he said that she was alive when he left. Shortly after, Schlatter added that something could have happened because alcohol clouded his mind. He thought he was not capable of it. The police charged Colleen Schlatter with taking the life of Tess Ritchie, but, of course, he denied his guilt. In June 2018, two police officers, Alan McCullough and Michael Jones, were charged with 2 counts of misconduct for neglect of duty under Ontario's Police Services Act. According to the notice of hearing, they allegedly failed to thoroughly search the adjoining property or immediate area, interview neighbors, and notify a supervisor. If they had followed protocol, Christine Hermiston stated, they would have found her. She was lying just around the corner. Despite all this, both officers remained working in the police, but received penalties. As for Colleen Schlatter, during the 7-week trial held in 2020, his defense tried to prove his innocence, arguing that someone else could have approached the stairs where Tess was lying by climbing over the fence on the other side of the building and thus remained invisible to the cameras. The lawyers even gave the name of another suspect, but the police thoroughly checked and interrogated this person, finding no evidence linking him to Tess's death. DNA evidence pointed to only one person, Colleen Schlatter. Schlatter was a slight man who appeared soft-spoken in court. He said he has a speech defect that causes him to slur his words and stutter sometimes. Trying to explain the presence of his DNA on Tess's belongings, he said she offered him to hide from prying eyes. At 4:02 a.m., Tess Ritchie ordered an Uber. The driver arrived at the pickup point at 4:14 a.m., but Tess wasn't there. Instead of letting Ritchie meet her Uber driver, Schlatter again approached her. They sat down on a bench at the corner of Church and Dundonald. Tess seemed a bit more upset from the argument, so I walked over to her to check if she was all right, Schlatter said. He said it was Ritchie who asked him to sit and talk. It's impossible to corroborate his account as there is no sound on any security video from the area. Schlatter testified Ritchie was bummed about her breakup, so he started talking about the dissolution of one of his previous relationships to make her feel better. She listened intently, he said, and even declined a phone call during their conversation. It was a lie. The police examined Tess's mobile phone records and discovered no one had called her during their conversation. Later on, She asked if it's okay if she kisses me, Schlatter said. We stand up and give each other a hug and kiss. These words could not be confirmed either since there weren't any kisses on the CCTV footage available to the police. According to Schlatter, Ritchie asked him to follow her to the driveway at 582 Church Street and down into the property's outdoor stairwell. The prosecution considered these words a lie because at that time, the Uber driver was waiting for Tess. They suggested that Schlatter offered to escort Tess to her car, but he was planning something completely different. We will never know what Schlatter told Tess Ritchie as they walked up Church Street to convince her to walk into the dark at 4 a.m. with a man she just met. Schlatter claimed that he and Tess went down the stairs and started kissing. He wanted more, but Tess said they couldn't go any further. According to Schlatter, they kissed for a long time, which resulted in him ejaculating into his pants. After that, he invited Tess to his house, but she refused and said he could leave, which he did. Schlatter continued insisting Tess was alive when he left. It is important to note that all of the above was Schlatter's story, which the police could not verify. Only 2 people knew the truth about what happened that night. One of them was already dead. The prosecution's witnesses at the trial were Riley, a friend of Tess, and Michelle Tipp, a woman with whom they talked that night. They both identified Schlatter. Schlatter not only spilled his guts to 2 undercover cops, he allegedly confided crucial details to a cellmate when they were at a Toronto detention center for roughly 2 months in 2018. The man, who can only be referred to as ES because of a publication ban, has a criminal record spanning decades, including several break-and-enters and a domestic assault. The informant said he initially felt sorry for Schlatter as he was a young man in jail for the first time. That's why ES invited him to share his cell while the 2 were in protective custody. But over time, ES soured on his new cellmate. Schlatter would cry himself to sleep at night because he didn't want to do time and because he missed his mommy, and yet he showed no remorse about Ritchie's death, ES said. He said Schlatter told him about his kiss with Ritchie and that he lost control when she said she didn't want to go any further. He couldn't stop and strangled Tess with a scarf. In court, Schlatter flatly denied that those conversations took place. His lawyer called ES a manipulative pathological liar. Putting aside all the testimony and relying only on physical evidence, one can conclude that someone strangled Tess Ritchie, and only one person's DNA was on her clothes, Kaylin Schlatter. In her closing address to the jury, defense lawyer Lydia Riva portrayed Schlatter as a harmless kid and an innocent young man. As hard as it might be to accept and as uncomfortable as it might make us feel, the criminal justice system can get it wrong, Riva said. Mr. Schlatter was an easy target. He is easy to blame. On March 23, 2020, the jury found Schlatter guilty. The judge sentenced him to life imprisonment with the right to request parole after 25 years. The trial was heartbreaking for Ritchie's mother, sisters, and other supporters who were at times reeling and crying in the courtroom. While they now have some of the answers they craved for so long, their lives are forever changed. Evil not only took Tess that night, it sentenced her surviving family to a cruel and painful future while robbing the world of so much love and potential, said Ritchie's sister, Verena. Tess was the heart of my family, and we will forever be incomplete. In June 2020, Tess Ritchie's family sued Schlatter, the police, and others because of the psychological devastation they experienced after Tess's death. Do I want to just go in the house and hide and let it go? Absolutely. But can I? Absolutely not. I can't because I can't get it out of my head that they let her lay there for 4 days, said Christine Hermiston. That image is seared in her mind forever, Hermiston said. That in that she should not have needed to travel from her home in North Bay, Ontario to Toronto to do the job of the police. Tess was the glue of the family, and her death has torn everyone apart, her mother said. We have trouble looking at each other. We feel like we all let Tess down. We feel a lot of guilt, and that's why we're continuing to fight on behalf of Tess because we're not going to let her down again. They are seeking a total of $20 million in damages, including punitive damages. Yvonne Waters, 17, and Raylene Eaton, 16, were cousins who lived in Perth, Western Australia, and shared a close bond, spending much of their free time together. On Sunday, April 4, 1974, They went to the tavern at the White Sands Hotel in nearby Scarborough to listen to a band. However, neither girl returned home that night. At first, their mothers were not overly concerned. While it was unusual for the girls to stay out all night, their mothers initially thought they might have spent the night at each other's homes. But when both women realized their daughters were absent from both households, they feared something was terribly wrong. The police, however, did not immediately share the family's concerns. They assumed the girls had run away or were staying with someone they had met at the hotel. It wasn't until several days later that the police began questioning witnesses who had been at the White Sands Hotel that afternoon. Numerous people who had been there that day reported that Yvonne and Raylene had been spending time with three men who appeared to be in their early to mid-20s. They also may have been laborers based on their attire. The doorman at the hotel bar told police that Raylene and Yvonne went out into the parking lot with the three men around 6:45 p.m. The group of five was seen standing around a white hold and panel van. The van had plates from Queensland, and the plate number began with the letters PXJ. It is unclear if the girls got inside or left in the van. Police were unable to trace down the van despite having the partial plate number. Just 10 days after the girls' disappearance, Raylene's only sibling, her 18-year-old brother, Graham, was involved in a motorcycle accident. 2 weeks later, he passed away in the hospital from his injuries. Raylene's mother, Jean, now 95, continues to appear publicly and give press interviews in hopes of finding answers to the disappearance of her daughter and niece. Karen Denise Wells, who went by her middle name, was a 23-year-old mother to an 18-month-old son, William. On April 10, 1994, Denise dropped William off at her parents' home in Haskell, Oklahoma. She told them that she was going to be driving to northern New Jersey to see a childhood friend, Melissa Shepard, and that she will be back to pick up William in 4 days. Denise would not make it to New Jersey. On April 12th, she checked into the Pike Motel outside of Carlisle, Pennsylvania around 8 p.m. She asked the clerk for directions to a nearby McDonald's. She then called Melissa, telling her that she would not be able to make it to New Jersey. Melissa agreed to travel to Pennsylvania the next day and meet Denise at her motel room. Denise told Melissa that she was going to get some dinner at McDonald's before going to sleep before she hung up the phone. This will be the last known contact with Denise. The following day, April 13th, Melissa arrived at the motel with two men she had met at the bar where she was working. When she could not get Denise to answer the door of her room, she asked motel staff to let her into the room. Denise's luggage was in the hotel room, proving she had been there, but the bed did not appear to have been slept in. Melissa called police to report Denise missing. Also, on the morning of April 13th, Denise's rented car was found abandoned on a remote stretch of Route 274 near New Germantown in Perry County, Pennsylvania, approximately 35 miles from the Pike Motel. The white Plymouth Acclaim was seemingly abandoned in the middle of the road and left with the front doors on both sides of the car opened. A passing motorist attempted to turn on the car's emergency flashers, but they would not come on as the car's battery was dead. It was also out of gas. The car appeared to have been driven off-road at some point as it was streaked with mud and strange scratches. The car also had 700 more miles on it than would have been expected, had Denise driven from Tulsa, where she had rented it, straight to the area where she was last seen. At a press conference in 2009, Cumberland County District Attorney David Fried told the press that there were indications of criminal activity in Denise's rental car, but would not specify what those indications were. It has previously been reported that a small amount of marijuana had been found inside the car. According to authorities, there were no signs of struggle inside the car when it was found. Denise's coin purse, still with cash inside of it, was found in a ditch near where the car was found. There was a thorough search of the surrounding woods and the few hunting cabins that were nearby, but no other sign of Denise was found in the area. Strange details and unanswered questions about the days prior to Denise's disappearance have plagued the investigation. Upon examination, problems with Denise's trip appear even before she began it. Denise had told her parents that she would only be gone for 4 days, but the drive from Haskell, Oklahoma to North Bergen, New Jersey would today take about 22 hours each way. While available highways may have been different in 1994, it is hard to imagine that Denise's travel time could have been much shorter than that. With the drive taking up almost half of the time Denise planned to be away, and assuming that Denise would also stop to sleep like she did at the motel in Pennsylvania, that would leave almost no time at all for her to spend with Melissa. This begs the question, what was so important to make Denise spend so much time getting to the East Coast just to see Melissa for such a short amount of time? Melissa had been working as an exotic dancer in New Jersey, and Denise had decided to drive halfway across the country to see her because Melissa was going through what Denise's family has described as personal issues. Denise's mother has also publicly stated that Denise was going to save Melissa, but it remains unknown exactly why Denise felt it was necessary to make the long trip. Phone records and witness statements also placed Denise in the Pennsylvania towns of Shaperstown and Burnville on April 12th. Both of these towns are approximately an hour further east than the Pike Motel. Since New Jersey was her intended destination, it is strange that Denise drove an hour back in the opposite direction of it to stop for the night, especially hoping that one day a new witness will come forward to help make her case. Hoping that one day a new witness will come forward to help make sense out of this confusing case. As of 2018, Denise's son, William, was 25 and engaged to be married. Mayama Little was born on April 6, 1910 in Warm Springs, Georgia. She worked as a physical therapist at the Roosevelt Warm Springs Institute for Rehabilitation from 1927 to 1931. Franklin Delano Roosevelt had purchased the struggling Warm Springs Infantile Paralysis Foundation and renamed it after himself in 1927 after visiting it in hopes that it would improve his mobility following his own polio diagnosis. Mayama personally treated Roosevelt several times and was reportedly one of his favorite therapists. Roosevelt eventually ascended to the presidency of the United States, and the United States eventually descended into World War II. Mayama enlisted in the Women's Auxiliary Army Corps in early 1943 and used her skills as a physiotherapist to serve her country. She had married and divorced, but retained her married name of Ridings. By August of 1943, she had become a corporal and was stationed at Camp Atterbury in Indiana. On August 28th, Corporal Ridings was granted a weekend leave and traveled the 30 miles from Camp Atterbury to Indianapolis on a 3:30 bus. She stopped at a liquor store at 4:45 to purchase a bottle of whiskey. Just after 5 p.m., she checked into the Claypool Hotel, where she was given room 729. At 5:30, she called room service to ask for 6 bottles of soda and ice to be brought up to her room. At 6:15, she called for more ice to be brought up. At 8 p.m., a housekeeper arrived at room 729. When no one answered her knock at the door, she let herself in. She then discovered the body of Corporal Ridings, naked from the waist down and covered in blood. It was later determined that Corporal Ridings had been hit over the head with and then slashed with a shattered glass from the whiskey bottle she had purchased earlier in the day. Her autopsy also found that she had consumed approximately 10 ounces of the 100 proof whiskey before her death. Corporal Ridings had sex shortly before her death, but the medical examiner and the police disagreed over whether it had been consensual or not. Given the fact that she had recently gone through a divorce, her ex-husband, Lawrence S. Ridings, would seem like an obvious suspect, but he was a soldier deployed overseas at the time of the murder. There was only 46 cents left in Corporal Ridings' room. She had not prepaid for her hotel room, and she had been seen trying to make change for a $20 bill earlier in the day, indicating that she had been robbed. It has been widely theorized, however, that her killer only took the money to make it look like a robbery rather than that being the actual motive for the crime. As the last person to see Corporal Ridings alive, the bellboy who brought her ice at 6:15 that evening, 22-year-old Robert Wolfington, was subjected to hours of continuous questioning and a lie detector test after police found discrepancies in his initial statements. Wolfington was never connected to the crime through evidence, but he did provide important clues in the case. He told police that when he entered room 729 at 6:15, a dark-haired woman dressed all in black, complete with black veil, had been in the room with Corporal Ridings. She had been sitting on the bed smoking a cigarette. Corporal Ridings would routinely travel to Indianapolis and stay in a hotel on weekends when she was granted leave from the Women's Army Corps. She was known at area hotels for being a generous tipper and for throwing large parties. On her last several weekends in Indianapolis, Corporal Ridings had been seen at parties around the city with a woman all in black. It was therefore thought that it was possible that this was the same woman in black seen in her room on the night of her death. However, a woman named Ruth Hoover came forward shortly after the murder, asserting that she was the woman in black seen with Corporal Ridings out in public. Ruth Hoover had served in the Women's Auxiliary Army Corps at Camp Atterbury with Corporal Ridings, but had left the service when it became the Women's Army Corps and its members received full Army benefits in July 1943. She told the Indianapolis News that she and Corporal Ridings had spent all of their leave weekends together prior to her departure. She had left Indiana on August 4th and was in her hometown of Water Valley, Mississippi at the time of the crime, and as such could not be the same woman seen in room 729 on August 28th. She also told the newspaper that her friend drank her whiskey straight, so if she ordered 6 bottles of soda, she must have been expecting a crowd. Identifying the woman in black was an important goal of the investigation because she may have witnessed the crime or the killer arriving at room 729. While Corporal Ridings could have been killed any time between 6:15 and 8 p.m., there is an beginning of that window. Corporal Ridings had scheduled a date that night with Corporal Emmanuel Fisher, who was also stationed at Camp Atterbury. They had planned for him to pick her up at the hotel at 6, but he had been running late. He arrived at the hotel at 6:30 and called her room from the lobby. There was no answer. He assumed that she made other plans when he did not show up on time and left the hotel. While Corporal Ridings may have simply ignored the phone, it is also possible that she may have been fending off her killer at that time, meaning that the woman in black would have been in the room just 15 minutes before the murder occurred. The murder of Corporal Ridings briefly achieved national attention when her connection to President Roosevelt was discovered. This publicity brought out a few confessions to the crime, but they were all discredited, retracted, or both. There have been attempts to link the case to other cases in Ohio, Chicago, and California, but none of these theories have ever been proven true. Corporal Ridings was buried in her hometown. The Claypool Hotel has since been torn down. Sometimes, facing a harsh truth is better than the torment of not knowing. That's exactly what Maria Leone believed when her 16-year-old daughter vanished without a trace. Initially, everyone clung to the hope that the girl would be found alive. But time went on. Those hopes began to fade. Maria started praying that her daughter would be found, even if she wasn't alive, so she could lay her child to rest properly. Yet, no one anticipated how dreadful the resolution would turn out. The case involving the murder of young schoolgirl Melanie Stacy Amaya shook Columbia with its brutality and shocking outcome. The most horrifying element was that those involved were ordinary teenagers who had recently been romantically linked. Let's delve into this grim story from the beginning to understand how a love-struck boy transformed into a cold-blooded killer who executed his ex-girlfriend. We will also examine any adult oversights and consider whether this tragedy might have been preventable. Who was Melanie Stacy Amaya? Our focus today is on her life and untimely demise. Born on February 21, 2002, in the small town of San Rafael in northern Colombia, she was the eldest daughter in a modest family, consisting of Maria Leone and William Amaya. 2 years later, they welcomed another daughter named Natalie. From an early age, both girls were very close-knit, sharing secrets and developing strong bonds with their mother. Melanie showed creative talents early on. She drew beautifully and had an innate passion for cosmetics. She loved painting her dolls' faces along with those of her mother and sister, and even friends, declaring she'd become a stylist and makeup artist someday. Academically gifted too, she did well at school where teachers described her as talented and driven, qualities which made her both sociable and friendly. She could light up any room. Naturally charismatic, it wasn't surprising that Melanie had many friends inside and outside school. Her attractive appearance garnered attention, aided by her adept use of cosmetics. But life took a hard turn when Melanie turned 14. Her parents filed for divorce then, but managed to separate amicably while keeping warm relations intact. Father kept close ties with his daughters, offering both financial support and active involvement in their lives. About 6 months later, Maria started dating a man named Ruben Morales, whom she soon married. Following their wedding, the family relocated to Medellin, a major city in Colombia. Here, Ruben had secure employment, and the girls found ample opportunities for education and personal growth. The stepfather developed an excellent relationship with his teenage stepdaughters. He readily invested in their education and hobbies, ensuring the girls enjoyed a more comfortable life. Treating them as his own daughters, he surrounded them with care and attention. During high school, Melanie began exhibiting a challenging, somewhat rebellious nature. She became seriously interested in music and even contemplated leaving school to focus solely on this passion. Dreaming of becoming a DJ, she requested a mixing desk for her birthday. Additionally, she had several large tattoos on her arms, back, chest, and leg, bold and brightly colored. Her parents did not impede her quest for self-expression, but were shocked upon discovering that Melanie experimented with illegal substances. Beneath her unconventional behavior and appearance experiments was an individual who ultimately led to her demise. On her 14th birthday in 2016, Melanie decided to host a party inviting all her friends along with a DJ. Lacking funds for hiring a professional musician, but receiving contact information from acquaintances, Melanie reached out to 16-year-old Miguel Angel Perea, an aspiring yet talented disc jockey. After some deliberation, the birthday girl decided to call him. Miguel proved exceptionally talented and possessed notable charisma. He captivated young Melanie completely. Then, after celebrating her birthday, they continued communicating. Within weeks, teenagers were frequently seen together strolling through parks or around the streets. Melanie introduced him as her boyfriend. They quickly became inseparable while displaying mutual affection, holding hands tenderly, demonstrating their feelings openly wherever they went. Miguel came from quite modest or rather poor means, but treated his young girlfriend respectfully and admirably. Captivated by both respect, genuinely almost instantly charming when meeting, introducing himself warmly towards parents, earning acceptance, fostering no interference. Over time, he increasingly spent more time at the residence tied to his passport, integrating into the family dynamic. Miguel once confided in the girl's parents about difficulties at home. His mother disapproved of his involvement in music lessons, leading to a conflict that ended with him being physically harmed and subsequently evicted from his home. Maria offered him shelter temporarily until things could stabilize, not realizing the potential implications of introducing a disruptive influence into their family environment. Consequently, Melanie and Miguel began cohabitating. Initially, they experienced a harmonious period lasting 6 months, during which both teenagers appeared elated by their newfound togetherness. However, as time progressed, Miguel revealed aspects of his character that had an adverse impact on Melanie. Her academic performance deteriorated noticeably. Her behavior and appearance became increasingly provocative. Additionally, she started adorning herself with tattoos and expressed intentions to abandon school. With time, disagreements between the couple became frequent. While they initially attempted to resolve these conflicts outside the family home, such disputes eventually occurred openly within it. A significant concern for Maria arose upon discovering that her eldest daughter was involved in illegal substance use supplied by Miguel. In response to this revelation, Maria initiated a serious conversation with Melanie, who admitted tearfully to limited experimentation with drugs and promised never to engage in such behavior again. Despite deciding it was best for Miguel to leave due to his negative influence on their daughter, Melanie intervened on his behalf, assuredly promising improved conduct for both herself and Miguel moving forward. Reluctantly acquiescing after some deliberation proved to be another misstep for Maria and Ruben, as troubling signs soon emerged. Unexplained bruises on their daughter's body were evident, but consistently attributed by Melanie, either sports activities or clumsiness, rather than implicating her boyfriend's actions. 6 months later, a significant incident occurred. During a heated argument, Miguel assaulted the girl so severely that she needed medical attention. Maria wanted to file a police report for assault and bodily harm, but Melanie discouraged her, stating she would deny everything and refuse to accuse her partner. Melanie's parents tried to separate the couple and forbid them from living together. However, Melanie threatened to run away with him if their relationship was obstructed in any manner. This toxic relationship persisted for over 2 years until Melanie recognized it was detrimental to her well-being. In early May 2018, another intense quarrel erupted between the teenagers, escalating into physical violence. This time, Melanie took initiative and told Miguel their relationship was over. She demanded he pack his belongings and leave her home immediately, or she would contact the police about the abuse she endured. Miguel complied with her demands, but later asked for forgiveness. Despite this, he could not let go emotionally. Miguel began stalking Melanie, tracking her movements and monitoring whom she interacted with, and he regularly called and messaged her. His messages ranged from declarations of love and apologies to death threats. Concerned about this obsessive behavior, Ruben sought a restraining order against Miguel for the safety of his stepdaughter. Nevertheless, law enforcement dismissed his concerns, seeing no threat in what they perceived as teenage drama. Maria also reached out to the prosecutor's office citing potential danger posed by Miguel. However, authorities did not take her seriously either. They assumed incorrectly that an 18-year-old young man wouldn't harm his ex-partner, a belief rooted in unfamiliarity with his true nature. Mysterious disappearance of a schoolgirl. Almost 2 months had passed since the couple's separation. Miguel seemed to have calmed down and was no longer looking for meetings with Melanie. The girl lived her old life. Her grades at school improved noticeably. She met with friends and practiced music. Her parents also no longer had reason to worry. They tried to cross out the former boyfriend of their daughter from their memory and forget him like a bad dream. On June 28, 2018, Melanie was excited to attend a birthday party for her close friend. The event was scheduled to take place at one of the city's most popular nightclubs. To ensure she looked stunning, Melanie meticulously prepared herself by selecting an outfit, applying makeup, and styling her hair. Once she felt ready, she said goodbye to her mother and assured her she'd be back not too late before leaving in a waiting cab. Maria trusted her daughter's friends well enough not to worry excessively. However, the next morning brought concern when Maria realized that Melanie had not returned home. She attempted to contact Melanie, but discovered that her phone was turned off, a distressing sign. Despite this, Maria tried to stay calm by telling herself that the teenagers might have simply lost track of time and that Melanie's phone battery could be dead. Around lunchtime, Maria called Isaac and was shocked to hear that Melanie never arrived at the party. None of their friends had seen or heard from her either. Frantic with worry, Maria began calling all of Melanie's friends and classmates. Unfortunately, no one could provide any useful information about her whereabouts since she left the house. In response, Maria promptly contacted William, Melanie's father, and he rushed over immediately. Together with Ruben, the stepfather, they went to file a missing persons report at the police station. However, they encountered bureaucratic indifference as authorities noted that it is necessary to wait 24 hours and suggested that Melanie might just be asleep at a friend's place post-party. Refusing to waste precious time waiting passively for answers, the parents along with Ruben decided on taking swift action themselves. They mobilized relatives and friends in their search efforts by contacting all known acquaintances and visiting familiar places where she might have gone, while also distributing hundreds of flyers around the city, hoping for leads on Melanie's location. The next story we're sharing is about Veer Miller case. Bruce Miller was truly a kind man who carried the full weight of responsibility on his shoulders. He worked tirelessly, often without rest, to support his family, never holding back. His life was dedicated to making his wife happy. He was her supporter, her protector, and her source of stability. But in a cruel twist of fate, instead of being rewarded for his dedication and love, he became the victim of a ruthless crime. Bruce fell prey to the dark side of the internet. His feelings for Sherry grew after he hired her and helped raise 3 children with her. They eventually fell in love 2 years later, and this emotion completely consumed him. Bruce decided to adopt her children to create a united family and home for them all together. However, Sherry concealed her true intentions. While Bruce believed in their bright future together, She led a double life and deceived him. The computer Bruce bought for Sherry turned out to be more than just a gift. It became an instrument in her dreadful scheme. Instead of using it for business growth, she used it to plan his murder. Sherry came to realize that divorce wouldn't bring her desired wealth, and so she resorted to drastic measures by manipulating Bruce's feelings and using him as an instrument in her cruel plot. This case could be seen as one of its kind, a pioneering example where online interactions played a critical role in criminal activity. Perhaps this marked one of the first instances when internet communication became pivotal in legal proceedings. A fascinating development indeed. In today's era, such cases are increasingly common compared to times when the internet was nascent, and people were unaware that everything they did online could be tracked or restored. Sherry, like many others at that time, had no idea that deleted messages could be recovered later on. Also highlighted how dangerous it is chatting with strangers online and just how much one's life can change due to this form of communication. There are always individuals who find themselves unexpectedly at center stage, plunged into worlds full mysteries, intrigue. And Bruce surely counted among those people. A person whose story is packed with secrets, unexpected turns. Born on July 26, 1951 in Flint, Michigan, during younger years, Bruce worked as mechanic General Motors factory, but later changed course, opening own business salvage yard. Deal-told cars, reselling spare parts despite handling large cash sums, dealing different social groups, still known generous, kind-hearted individuals. Sometimes even bent law, falsifying license plates. Though rarely done, didn't have many romantic relationships. Followed marriages, both ending divorce, finally meeting fate, bringing final love. Sherry Miller. Sherry often displayed unusual habits, behavior according to her friends. She would act as if she were creating a new identity on the internet while engaging in flirtatious conversations with strangers. People's opinions were divided. Some believed Bruce was aware of it, but chose to ignore it, finding easier to maintain the status quo. Bruce valued his marriage and cherished the stability provided by Sherry, along with his efforts to adopt her 3 children. Sherry also aimed to preserve their marital bond. She had affection for Bruce and appreciated the appealing lifestyle he offered, even after she had misused his credit cards shortly following their wedding. This did not perturb Bruce much. Their relationship was as volatile as Sherry's personal life itself. They maintained a working routine during the day and spent intimate moments at night. Amid this familial bliss, Sherry's online alter ego began to emerge alongside her growing confidence. Her chat interactions became increasingly explicit, often focusing on sexual topics with various men under different aliases such as Horny 24 to 21, Love Me Slowly, and I Want to Be Seduced. Rather than sticking with consistent contacts, she preferred engaging with new individuals once boredom set in, initiating cycles of flirting anew each time. As per her own explanation, these interactions were mere playful engagements, a game wherein each new man represented another level of progress that boosted her sense of invincibility. This detached mentality eventually led Sherry down a detrimental path. Amidst her frequent online activities, Sherry encountered Jerry Cassidy, a former police officer residing in Reno, Nevada, and they quickly developed romantic feelings for each other. It seemed Jerry held a special place for Sherry in contrast to previous online acquaintances. Eventually, they even renamed their accounts, Sherry adopting Jerry's fool, while Jerry took on Sherry's fool. Their digital exchanges encompassed everything from casual texting and flirting to sharing nude photographs and exchanging sexually suggestive messages and videos featuring explicit content involving Sherry herself. One must remember that all these changes took place back in 1999 when executing such actions involved significantly more complexity compared to today's technological advancements. Jerry was born on October 6, 1960, in Kansas City, Missouri. From a young age, he was passionate about hunting and harbored of joining the FBI. He planned to achieve this by starting with the Montana Police. Jerry served as a detective in the homicide department for 9 years, eventually rising to the rank of lieutenant. However, by the end of his tenure, things took a troubling turn. While investigating one case, Jerry uncovered several fraudulent documents within the department. It was clearly an inside job. Acting responsibly, he reported these findings to his superior. Unfortunately, word got out among his colleagues. They branded him a snitch and ostracized him, jeopardizing his career. The situation escalated until it became evident that he was no longer welcome there. After being demoted, Jerry chose to resign from his position in 1994. This had a profoundly negative impact on him. Consequently, he began struggling with alcohol and substance addiction while also battling depression. Not long after these events unfolded, Jerry's wife divorced him. This divorce further affected him as it resulted in losing visitation rights with their son. Despite these setbacks, Jerry managed to reclaim some stability by taking up employment as a security officer at Harrah's Kansas City Hotel and Casino. In 1999, he relocated to Reno and found work at another casino there. During this period, Jerry met Sherry through an online platform and soon transitioned their relationship into real-life interactions. Rather than viewing the relationship as a passionate affair, Sherry started to exploit Jerry. Her influence over him became evident to those who knew him well. His observed that Jerry seemed to exhibit symptoms akin to bipolar disorder. He was highly enthusiastic when Sherry was around and deeply despondent in her absence. It wasn't long before Sherry began her deceitful manipulations. In September, she falsely declared that she was pregnant with Jerry's child. Shortly after, she claimed that she had miscarried due to Bruce allegedly beating her, though this was entirely untrue. Bruce in reality was a diligent family man and not the dangerous individual Sherry depicted him as. Jerry, unaware of the truth, became exceedingly angry. Losing his supposed unborn child and believing Sherry was subjected to violence were unbearable for him. A lot for anyone. Concurrently, Sherry dissuaded Jerry from confronting Bruce by claiming Bruce had significant influential connections and substantial wealth that would ensure they faced retribution if they acted against him. Just 1 month later, Sherry fabricated another story about being pregnant with twins. One crucial detail is that in 1995, Sherry underwent a tubal ligation procedure, which rendered her unable to conceive, but she never disclosed this information to Jerry. This shocking disclosure underscores the extent of deception involved in their relationship. On November 5, 1999, Jerry received a disturbing email that was purportedly from Bruce. The message stated that Sherry was gaining weight due to the 2 unborn children she was carrying and expressed her desire for an abortion to lose the extra pounds. Jerry, filled with anxiety, attempted to reach out to Sherry, but could only manage a brief text conversation in which she mentioned needing to leave for a few days. The following day brought another message supposedly from Bruce. This time, it informed Jerry that Sherry would be returning home soon and implied that the abortion had been completed successfully. However, it also indicated that Sherry would no longer be able to conceive. Enclosed in this communication was a staged photograph showing Sherry covered in bruises. Jerry experienced overwhelming rage. He contacted Sherry the next day, and they concluded that the only solution was to eliminate Bruce. They meticulously planned their approach, routes, a parking spot, and the best location and time for executing their plan at the yard. Driven by his mounting anger, Jerry departed from his home towards Michigan that same evening. As Bruce prepared to leave work later, he received a call from Sherry asking him if he could pick up pizza on his way back, a distraction integral to their plot. Engaged in this phone conversation, Bruce did not notice when Jerry approached him from behind and pointed a .20 caliber gun at him before pulling the trigger. Having committed the crime, Jerry returned home while Sherry set into motion their next phase of cover-up activities. She contacted Bruce's brother, Chuck, expressing concern about Bruce's failure to return home yet. Subsequently, alarmed by her worry, which she feigned, Chuck and his wife rushed over to investigate at the yard where they discovered Bruce's body with horror before dialing authorities. The authorities first suspected a robbery. Bruce's old friend, John Hutchinson, was their primary suspect right away. John owed his employer over $5,000 and had previously been involved with Shaw. His alibi was weak and he failed the polygraph test. No surprise the police had their doubts about him. Consequently, John was detained for questioning, but due to insufficient evidence, he was eventually released. Subsequently, the case went cold. Officers initially deemed Sherry's behavior after her husband's death appropriate. They were unaware of what she concealed at the time. Shortly thereafter, She was seen enjoying parties frequently. Moreover, and then, she swiftly secured an insurance payout, sold off the business, and withdrew funds from family accounts, thus becoming wealthy overnight. Amidst her festivities and expenditures, she invited her new partner to reside in the house formerly shared with Bruce. Jerry and Sherry's relationship fell apart abruptly after Bruce's death. That was when Jerry discovered Sherry had fallen for another man. He started to feel immense guilt and reflected on the dreadful crime he had committed alongside her. Having worked for the police for many years, Jerry quickly discerned that he was merely a pawn in Sherry's scheme. She manipulated his emotions to eliminate her husband. It dawned on him that Bruce was truly an innocent man. None of the accusations Sherry had fabricated involved abuse, affiliations, beatings, or children. Even the pictures presented as evidence were dated 1994. 3 months later, on February 11th, Jerry Cassidy chose to end his life. He was found alone in the apartment he rented from his cousin with a .22 caliber rifle beside him. Among his belongings were letters to his family and a note and briefcase addressed to his lawyer, John O'Connor. When John opened the briefcase, he discovered clear evidence of a crime that sealed Sherry's fate. In addition to various pieces of evidence unearthed after Jerry's death, there was also a note where Jerry confessed to killing Bruce and placed all blame squarely on Sherry. The note outlined how all available evidence would be handed over to the police. Jerry expressed deep regret and acknowledged his foolishness in being manipulated by Sherry into committing such an act. He revealed that everyone would now understand why he descended into depression. He had been unable to reveal the truth until now. Jerry also claimed that Sherry aimed solely at securing money and eliminating her husband. She succeeded in her goal, but disregarded the harm caused along the way. Following this startling revelation, authorities swiftly apprehended Sherry and charged her with second-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder. The trial against her defense attorney suggested that Jerry had fabricated his evidence against her out of guilt. They also attempted to shift the blame back onto JN. During the trial, disturbing messages between Sherry and JN were presented, wherein they discussed using a firearm. It was highlighted that a day after her husband's death, she altered her first name, last name, and address. After Jerry's demise, she repeated this action. The case concluded successfully in court, and after only 2 days of deliberation, the jury delivered its verdict. Sherry Miller was found guilty of second-degree murder, and on January 9, 2001, she received a life sentence in prison. However, several complaints arose from the defense regarding the trial. One notable issue questioned the admissibility of Jerry's letter as evidence. This concern led to such significant implications that 7 years later, in 2008, a judge ordered a retrial for the case. Consequently, as per federal court decisions, Sherry was released from prison in July 2009 until further trials could be conducted. For over 3 years, she walked free without restrictions, even accessing internet and dating sites. However, many individuals, especially Bruce's and Jerry's families, opposed this release, deeming it due to an absurd technicality. Back in August 2012, the district court reversed its decision, and Sherry returned to prison, where she has remained since. While she was at large, Sherry successfully reconnected with her children. This reconnection had a notably positive impact on her. In April 2016, she wrote a letter admitting guilt despite previously denying it. She explained that her initial denial stemmed from fear that an admission would hinder her chances of appealing for a retrial. Her attorneys had advised such action. However, they later denied this claim. They asserted that if they had known about her guilt earlier, they would have recommended pursuing a plea deal. Under such circumstances, Sherry would have faced only 15 years of imprisonment as opposed to the longer term she is currently serving. By then, Sherry had already spent 2 decades behind bars. Notably during this time, she entered into her 4th marriage with Michael Dinoy. Michael learned about her story through media reports and became interested in her situation, eventually proposing during their first meeting. Lloyd Lionel Gaines was born in 1911 in Water Valley, Mississippi. His father, Henry Richard Gaines, had once been a teacher but was working as a tenant farmer by the time Lloyd was born. Lloyd had 10 siblings, though not all survived childhood. His father passed away when Lloyd was just 15, and shortly after, Lloyd and his family moved to live with one of his older brothers in the central West End neighborhood of St. Louis, Missouri. When Lloyd arrived in St. Louis, he was several grade levels behind due to the inadequate education he had received in Mississippi. However, he was exceptionally bright and quickly caught up. He excelled academically and became the valedictorian of his high school class. He completed high school in just 3 years instead of the usual 4. Afterward, Lloyd spent a year at Stowe Teachers College in St. Louis before transferring to Lincoln University, a historically black university in Jefferson City, Missouri. He financed his education through a scholarship he won in an essay competition and by selling magazines. At Lincoln, Lloyd continued to thrive, joining the Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity and serving as class president during his senior year. In the 1930s, the University of Missouri was the only public institution of higher learning with a law school in the entire state. The university as a whole was only open to white students, so there were no educational options for African Americans in Missouri who wished to become lawyers. The state of Missouri would pay for African American students to leave the state to go to law school rather than integrate its own university. Noted historian Lorenzo Green was one of Lloyd's professors at Lincoln University. He was also very active in the NAACP, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. The NAACP is a civil rights organization, and one of its biggest goals at the time was equality in education. As Lloyd prepared to finish his undergraduate degree, Green presented him with an option for his advanced education that could have a major legal and social impact. With Green's promise of legal support from the NAACP, Lloyd applied to the all-white law school at the University of Missouri in the summer of 1935. It has been debated if Lloyd really desired to become a lawyer or if he merely volunteered to apply to law school so that he could serve as a plaintiff in a lawsuit following his inevitable rejection from the school based on his race. The NAACP had actively been looking for a way to challenge segregation in schools. They would require an active law case to mount a new challenge to Plessy versus Ferguson, the 1896 Supreme Court decision that held that public facilities, such as schools, could be segregated as long as the facilities for black and white students were equal. This decision would ultimately remain the law of the land until the Brown versus Board of Education decision in 1954, which recognized that separate schools were inherently unequal. Lloyd was an ideal candidate for such a lawsuit because of his stellar academic and extracurricular record. The University of Missouri would not be able to claim that they were rejecting him based on these aspects of his application, and would have to make their decision based on his race. Silas W. Canada, the registrar at the University of Missouri School of Law, initially refused to even consider reviewing Lloyd's application. In January of 1936, the NAACP sued Canada to force him to make a decision about Lloyd's admission to the school. In March of that year, Canada rejected Lloyd's application on the basis of his race, despite the fact that he had the academic credentials that would otherwise merit his acceptance to the law school. On April 15, 1936, Lloyd and the NAACP filed a lawsuit against Silas W. Canada to get Lloyd admitted to the School of Law at the University of Missouri. The lawsuit failed at the state and local levels, potentially due in part to the fact that the majority of the judges who heard the case at these levels had attended the School of Law at the University of Missouri. Gaines versus Canada was heard by the Supreme Court on November 9, 1938, and on December 12, the court ruled 6-2 in Lloyd's favor. It was not a complete victory, however. The court upheld the notion of separate but equal, but ruled that it was a violation of the 14th Amendment of the Constitution for a state to fail to make an educational program available to all citizens. Missouri had to either let African American students into the existing law school or make a new law school just for them. Missouri took the second option. Following Gaines versus Canada, they began the process of hastily throwing together a law school for African American students inside of a former cosmetology school in St. Louis. The NAACP began the process of bringing further legal action. They believed that the only way to ensure equal education for African American students would be to get the courts to rule that the segregated, clearly substandard school was not equal to the school at the all-white university. Using this reasoning, they began new proceedings to get Lloyd admitted to the School of Law at the University of Missouri. While waiting for new legal proceedings to begin, Lloyd attended the University of Michigan with the help from the NAACP, graduating with a master's in economics in 1938. He worked for the state of Michigan until the beginning of 1939, when he returned to St. Louis to prepare for court dates that at the time were set for that August. Made mildly famous through his Supreme Court case, he traveled around to give speeches for the NAACP and at civil rights gatherings. He would receive small donations at these speeches, but was struggling financially. He often was forced to borrow money from his siblings for even minor expenses. Due to his race, his notoriety, and the ongoing Great Depression, Lloyd had trouble finding employment. Despite his level of education, the only job he could find in St. Louis was working at a gas station. He had to quit this job when he realized that the station's owner was engaging in deceptive business practices. Lloyd then had to travel to find work, first to Kansas City and then to Chicago, where he eventually was able to get a position at a department store. Due to his financial struggles, he often relied on friends and supporters to make ends meet. By the middle of March 1939, with no other place to live, he had been taken in by members of a Chicago chapter of his undergraduate fraternity and was staying at the fraternity house. The last known sighting of Lloyd was on March 19, 1939. He left the fraternity house to go out to buy stamps and never returned. He had plans to go to dinner that evening with the Page family, who were family friends from St. Louis, now living in Chicago. They often had Lloyd over for meals, and that night he wanted to take them out to dinner to repay their kindness. He did not show up. He also did not show up for his first day of work at the department store. His personal belongings were left behind at the fraternity house. Lloyd's disappearance was not immediately noticed due to his independent nature and the fact that he was traveling so much. His family was concerned when they stopped receiving his regular letters, but did not have enough faith in the police at the time to report his disappearance. When he did not resurface in St. Louis for the new round of legal proceedings in the fall of 1939, the public search for him finally began. Since it had been several months since he vanished, there were few clues to follow in the case. In his absence, his case was dropped by the court. An immediate concern was that Lloyd had been killed in retaliation for his participation in the court case. However, crimes against civil rights activists at this time often had at least some aspect of publicity to them, so as to instill fear in other African Americans who were considering taking action to receive equal rights. The fact that Lloyd's body was not left somewhere it could be found and inspire fear could count against this theory. However, if Lloyd in fact was made to disappear, whoever was responsible for the disappearance pulled it off without leaving any clues behind, a feat that could also send fear and unease throughout the African American community. Another theory in the case holds that Lloyd simply left to start a new life. In letters to his mother, he wrote of how he was struggling with the publicity his case had garnered for him. While he understood the significance of his court case, he was growing tired of the fight. By the time he went missing, it seemed increasingly unlikely that Lloyd would actually attend law school at the University of Missouri, regardless of the outcome of the court case. He told his mother that he believed that going to the school would be dangerous for him, given the publicity of the court battle. His main motivation for continuing as a plaintiff in the legal action seems to purely be to ensure that other African American students would have equal access to education through the legal precedent in the case and not for his own personal enrichment. In 2007, an investigation into the case by the Riverfront Times, a weekly newspaper in St. Louis, came across secondhand information that supported the idea that Lloyd had simply walked away from his life. Sid Reedy, a librarian who had been an Alpha Phi Alpha brother at Lincoln University, told reporter Chad Garrison that after he took an interest in the case in the 1970s, he had tracked down Lorenzo Green, Lloyd's old professor. Green allegedly told him while on vacation in Mexico in the late 1940s, he had received a phone call from Lloyd. He was sure that it was actually Lloyd because he recognized his voice. Lloyd told Green that he had started a business in Mexico City and was doing well. The two made plans to meet for dinner, but Lloyd did not show up to the meal. Green's son corroborated the account, saying that his father had told him the same story. Lorenzo Green had passed away in 1988, so he could not provide a first-hand account of what had happened when he was in Mexico. Furthermore, since Green never actually saw Lloyd, it is still possible that the phone calls were just a cruel hoax, even if they did occur. Some of Lloyd's surviving family is willing to believe that he lived out his life in Mexico, mainly because this would provide their relative with a happy life rather than a violent death. However, the majority of the family does not believe that Lloyd would have completely cut off all ties with his family, especially his mother, even if he did want to leave the country. A theory bridging the two extremes of Lloyd either being killed or walking away from his life of his own accord suggests that Lloyd may have merely been threatened with violence. If people unhappy with the progress Lloyd was making for African Americans threatened his family and ordered him to disappear, he may have complied to protect his loved ones. While leaving his family without answers about what became of him seems cruel, he may have felt it was necessary to ensure their safety. While Lloyd's fate remains unknown, his legacy does have tangible effects in the educational system and the African American community. The legal actions he took played a part in the desegregation of the University of Missouri in 1950, and his Supreme Court case was cited in the 1954 Brown v. Board of Education decision. In 2000, the Black Culture Center at the University of Missouri was renamed the Gaines Oldham Black Culture Center in honor of Lloyd and Dr. Marion O'Fallon Oldham, a civil rights activist who had also been denied admission to the school on account of her race. A member of the Gaines family finally received a law degree in the state of Missouri in 1991, when Lloyd's great-niece, Tracy Berry, graduated from the School of Law at Washington University in St. Louis. Lloyd was awarded an honorary degree by the School of Law at the University of Missouri in 2006, and the Bar Association of the State of Missouri in turn awarded him an honorary law license. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the depths of unsolved mysteries. Cold cases not only challenge our understanding of the past, but also ignite our curiosity and determination for answers. Remember to subscribe to stay updated on our latest investigations. And if you have any information regarding the cases we've covered, don't hesitate to reach out. Together, we can shed light on the shadows of the past and bring closure to those who seek it. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay curious, and never stop seeking the truth.